don't have I don't have my double monitoring. Shit. I think it's all set up. I think so, at least. Give me a second to check some stuff. Make sure that... What? I need to see if there's something I could do. I'm pretty sure I can... Alrighty. I think I can double manage the live stream. I need to see if there's something I could do. Oh, there we go. This way, I can actually better see your guys' comments. I feel like we should have some like relaxing music playing, not gonna lie. Oh, poo-poo my phone. Hold on. Should I do relaxing music or should I have like... Man, I can't decide if I should do relaxing music or have a game or something playing so people can watch. Pretty sure I can... Well, you know what they say, life is full of trials and errors. We'll try this. I still feel like music should play. Something to like kind of keep everybody entertained. I used to fall asleep to this.
After Advil dual action back pain.
Yo! Oh, ha, ha. What? My back feels better.
Before Advil. Oh. New Advil dual action back pain fights back pain 2 ways for 8 hours of relief.
Wow.
Hey, if you make it to the end of this video, I'm
not giving them free advertisement, sorry. Hello, Zane the Rapper. There we go. Hold on, I think the music is too loud. Holy crap. Let's bring that down by a lot. Okay. I use that meditation music too. Yeah, I used to fall asleep to it like every night. Cause I always like I don't know, it was just always so beautiful to sleep to. So good for meditation as well. Speaking of meditation, I had a meditation video I was working on all day today and accidentally found out that I did not save the thumbnail for the video. And I was upset because I put so much effort into that thumbnail. And now it is nothing more than deleted pixels. Sucks. I always find that Egyptian music and Arabian music are, I think, some of the best music that there are to listen to if you're looking for something relaxing. I think it's the feeling of the desert, kind of. Just a big, scorching, like, place full of heat. It was a very good thumbnail, and I was so proud of myself for it too. And I was so disappointed when I just deleted it. Pleasant surprise I caught one of these. Yes, I'm glad you're here. We're just doing a Q&A. I'm also a philosophy major in college right now. I'm wanting to double major in history, so if you have any questions about history or philosophy or religious practices, since I am a monk, feel free to ask away. There are no wrong questions here. I don't even think there's such a thing as a wrong question, essentially. The whole point of a question is to ask something. I don't know how you can be wrong at asking something. Why do you think God spousing is so controversial? I have a video on it, but my understanding of God spousing definitely changed the more I the more I had practiced it. God spousing is mixed because I don't think a lot of newer pagans have an understanding of what the practice is. For example, God spousing is it's normally portrayed as like being in a literal romantic relationship with a god, but that is to me the furthest thing from the truth. It is equivalent to monk and nunhood, not just marriage. As somebody actually in one of the videos I did on God spousing pointed out, that it is almost disrespectful to the gods to even imply that you're in a romantic relationship with them, because that is basically trying to put them on a kind of human level, essentially. And you're not supposed to be doing that with gods, since we have to respect that they are beings of higher power. Though the question is, how exactly are they of the higher plane? How did they get there? That's open for the air. But I think it's controversial because it's either a completely misrepresented practice or people don't have a good idea of what it is. People don't hate God spousing, they hate what people assume is God spousing. No one will really have a problem with you becoming a nun or a monk for any god unless it was just against their religion. I don't think there's such a thing as a wrong question challenge accepted. No, JK, I'm not gonna troll. I challenge you to find a wrong question. I will answer any question you ask, as well to my abilities. Now, do not overestimate my abilities and assume that I can answer everything. If you start asking me questions like, is the Buddha a god? There's going to be a lot of beating around the bush on that question, because it's not an easy question to answer. How common was God spousing before Marvel movie revival? Was it a controversial thing? You know, I love that. I actually really love that question, because there actually was a lot of controversy amongst a lot of the Norse pagan community during the time period of like the Marvel movies coming out, and a lot of people were like wanting to work with these gods like Loki and Thor and all these other kinds of deities, because they were so drawn by the Marvel movies. And there is this, actually, funny enough, I think it did become more controversial after the Marvel movies released, but it was kind of for an entirely different reason. It wasn't because, like, it was for the fact that there was more of an influx of people who were more enticed by the idea of being married to a god than they were the actual practice. Since you're a philosophy major, I was going to ask you, what you think Jesus is? Some people say he is a healer from another planet. What's your thoughts on that? Jesus is I'm actually going to be doing a video on this. I haven't decided when, but I'm really eager to work on it. because it's going to be discussing pagans working with Jesus and the different interpretations they have versus how Christians portray him. And I've heard there's so many differences with how I've seen some people work with Jesus and their interpretations of him than I have with other people. Because it's hard for me to, I know how to word it. It's hard for me to make the words to word it. The differences between how other people work with him is night and day, and it made me kind of shift my perspective on Jesus as the character. I think Jesus was as in when he was alive, a failed Jewish Messiah. But I believe that after he did die, he would become a divine figure after death. And I believe that it was through seeing some errors in his teachings that I believe he has, because I'm writing a bit of a book called The Critique of Jesus. And I believe that he learned how to be a better, or how he learned not to be a better person, but he learned from the mistakes of his actions where he could be better. And I believe that him now, he is just a divine figure who is a very unconditionally loving being who does not have any care or focus on religious belief or practice, and that he is still, man, I really suck at wording things, that he is just that, a divine being that is now helping people discover themselves and where they truly lie. But I do not believe the Christian interpretation of Jesus. I don't believe of him as their God. I don't believe him as the son of their God. I believe that he was a failed Jewish Messiah that was passionate enough about the world that upon death, he went on a discovery and became a divine figure who assists people on their journey of their own self-discovery. That's who I think Jesus is. It's nearly autumn, and for some reason I keep feeling like my main deity, Anubis, wants some sort of themed scented candle, but I'm unsure what scent would be appeasing to him. For some reason, the first thing, when I read your comment, the first thing I had that came to my mind was cinnamon. But a very, very dark cinnamon. Like, not something that smells like sugar mixed with cinnamon, like a dark cinnamon. Something that might, like, it's a bitter kind of cinnamon scent. Anubis is really well known for liking darker scents and like darker flavors. So something is the most naturalist that you can get. And of course, he's a god of the dead, so, makes sense. Also, a healer from another planet in the terms of Jesus. I know that is a Gnostic interpretation, and I don't think the Gnostics are wrong. I actually think they held a lot more. They really formed from Socrates. A lot of their beliefs seem to come from that kind of philosophy. But I think their interpretation of the Jewish God is pretty accurate. But I couldn't see Jesus as a healer from another planet. Sorry for all my yawning. As a healer from another planet. I know somebody did a video on did Jesus exist, and he even said that a lot of people kind of interpret Jesus as a way that fits their belief, because Hindus actually believe that he was a reincarnation of Krishna, so there was that. I just want to reiterate, though, if anybody has a question, do not, I repeat, feel like it's bad to speak or ask the question. I am open to answer anything that you have, may it be awkward or weird, or that's how you're perceiving it. People say that back in the day, deities would rarely talk to humans, and if they did, it was someone of higher status. But it seems like you have a very good connection with Anubis. Do you think deities are more laid back now? The answer to the question is harder to answer because it's a bit more longer and lengthier. Back in the day, when we're looking at ancient Egypt, the big reason that it was said that only people of importance could speak to the gods was because most of those people who were speaking to the gods were political leaders. The pharaohs were the anointed ones from the gods who ruled the country, anointed from Horus. In Greek, the oracles were always the hand-picked people by the higher-ups. And therefore, they were the ones that could speak to the gods. But Greek is a bit of a different situation because they would actually drug people to get answers. From the Norse perspective, it was only those who were strongest. In the Christian perspective later on, the Islamic perspective, it was the most anointed or priests or leaders, essentially. So the thing is that anybody can speak to the gods, and the gods will speak to you. If you have a stable communication with your god, then consider it an honor. Don't think of yourself as something special. Think of it as an honor that they are connecting well enough with you. I used to hear Anubis's voice a lot more, but ever since I discovered that I had psychosis, I questioned some of those experiences to know what was actually Anubis and what wasn't. Anubis has rarely spoken to me recently, and I'm looking at maybe the last time I actually heard him talk was about a year ago. But that doesn't mean he hasn't been there. I have seen him, felt him, experienced him. So he is still he's still there. In fact, he was getting on to me about not refilling his water on his altar the other day. So it's not nobody can speak with the gods. It's more of anyone can. But back then, they really don't want people thinking that they're equal. Because the second people start to think they're equal from other people is the second that structure falls apart. And it's a bit of a catch-22 because it's a good point. Alright, I've been doing some bopping around the room, but I do have a question. I'll let you answer this one first. Ask away when you're ready. Dark cinnamon sounds right. Thanks, I'm sure I wish this stupid heart would go away. I'm sort of relatively new, practicing synchronistic Kemeticism, and my gosh. And thanks for the advice and help. I also want to say that if you're needing some more assistance into getting into some of the practices, I have some videos on the channel that you could be able to check out. I wish I had done more, but really college started getting up on me. I need to probably do more of how... I think I have a whole video of how to work with the gods. I need to do one that's more on offerings. What's your favorite divination or communication method? Meditation. Meditation is actually, to me, the best method of communicating. But I grew a relationship with my deities to a point that they didn't need to communicate with me for me to know what they were wanting. At some point, and this may happen to, one of you at some point if you get to really working. Oh my gosh, I'm not even that tired. When you get to really working with your deity, there will probably be a point where you just won't even have to worry about them needing to communicate anything with you. You'll just know when they are. They will do something that makes it very obvious, or you will already have invoked them to a point that you are kind of doing the action. And I need to do a video on invocation, because invoking is like the most important thing to remember when you're practicing any religious practice. Actually invoking the god and having the god work through you, with you. If that makes sense. Alright, so about god spousing. Do you ever get scared or overwhelmed during interactions with Anubis? I have a maid god, and I often have to ask him to tell him to pull it back because I easily get overwhelmed. I did, actually, in the very beginning. Anubis is interesting. He won't push you. She. Anubis is pretty genderless. He won't push you if he knows you're uncomfortable. But I did have times where I originally worked with Anubis, and sometimes his energy in the beginning was just really overwhelming and hard to adapt with, especially when he was putting a lot more of it. And Anubis is a little bit of, we call Anubis daddy in a different sense, father essentially, because he kind of acts like one. If he knows you're not doing well, he will always kind of prioritize you over something else. He does really act like a father figure in many instances. So what you're experiencing is not uncommon. And this happens with a lot of people when you first start working with a deity, or if a deity is going too hard on you and you're not accustomed to some other energy. But eventually it just kind of flows in and out of you like butter. When you understand how to invoke the god and you understand how to adapt to their nature, it's nothing. It's like clockwork. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I'm not really a spiritual person. I want to strengthen my relationship with Anubis and do more spiritual stuff, but I just feel so scared. I just feel so scared to do that, and I'm not ready. How can I improve it? You can't force it. I hate to break that. You can't force it. You can certainly try, and many have. But the second you start forcing spirituality and forcing yourself to feel things is the second that you open yourself not only to spiritual attacks, but you open yourself to attacking yourself. The inner shadow of everybody is notorious for seizing the body at its weakest moment, because that's when it is the most vulnerable. It's important that if you simply are not able to feel something or feel that emotion, or if you are not able to feel the spiritual feeling, that you do not force it and you let it come naturally. The only thing I can offer you is to meditate. Depending on especially if you're working with Anubis, go walk around, enjoy life. Anubis is a god of death. Not really. I don't call him Lord of the Dead or God of the Dead. I call him God of Death. And the only way you can really, this ad had to show up in the middle of my deep conversation. Really? Anyways. But you cannot force it, and you don't want to leave yourself open to your own shadow to start attacking you. And what you can do, since Anubis is a god of death, is to enjoy life. The thing I've always learned is that the only way to truly respect death is to enjoy life. It is to appreciate life. The more you're in touch with life, the more you'll be able to feel more comfortable and connected to Anubis, who is death. People have interpreted Anubis a little differently, so I know some people might say, well, he's a god of the dead, he's a god of the underworld, but there's a reason I made a video that discussed this, and I said that he is, to me, a god of death. And one of the very early depictions of Anubis, he was a god of death. So don't force it. Take it as slow as you can. Appreciate your answer. Makes sense. Ready to invoke my gods. Any god yet? Not ready to invoke any god yet. Invocation is hard, but I think like I said, eventually it's like butter. A god will flow in and out of you, and you won't even feel it. You'll just know because you'll start acting differently. But be careful that you don't lose your true self when working with your deities. Always remember that you are still a person, and you are unique in your own way. So when you do start to invoke your gods, don't try to get too lost into acting like the god. Make sure you never forget your true self. I wanted to make this like a poster that's like, ask monk for Anubis anything, ask away. But unfortunately, I was not able to, due to, unfortunately, having technical issues and taking, quite literally, forever to get this working. Thank you. I feel a connection to Anubis, but I just feel like he knows I'm not ready, and maybe he's waiting. I'm not sure, maybe. It sounds crazy. It doesn't sound crazy. It sounds pretty natural. It's important to remember, like always, that if you're not ready to work with a god, you simply just aren't ready. There might be some other lesson that you have to learn before that god can fully help you and teach you in the way that you need to be getting taught. Oops. So don't rush it. Just take it slow. Sometimes in life, that's all you can do. "100% agree. I think I've seen pagans, especially new ones, think they need to imitate or be like the god. It's one thing to be drawn by inspiration, it's another thing to imitate them. I cannot agree with that point enough. I've dealt with it before. Actually, here's a really funny story. Some people might laugh. There was this girl who was, quote unquote, God's spouse to Hades. And she was constantly trying to act like Hades. And I kid you not, she would wear black makeup, she would walk around, and she acted all emo and goth, which I don't have any problems with gothic or emo styles. I think a lot of times, especially in many cases, it looks great. But when you're doing it because you want to try to be something else, that's when I normally have a problem. And she would just try to act like Hades because to her, and her own words, that's what Hades would want. It's really, really awkward. And before I get to your other question, there's someone I wanted to answer. "Hello, I made it. I have some questions on your experience with Anubis. once you are ready to change this subject. Hey, just ask away. Just ask any question you want to ask. Just note that, just ask. I might get to it after answering other questions, but that's what keeps the live stream interesting and entertaining for everybody. So ask your question, and I'll get to it as soon as I get to the other questions. I'm not going to neglect any questions, so you ask and it scrolls up. I'm going to stay on where the question is at. I think it's part of recovering Christian thing. Yes, there was a lot of things that when I got into paganism or Kemeticism, that I really started to struggle because there was some things that carried over from when I was a Christian, which is why it really made it difficult for me to work with Seth. What do you think of the Islamic religion? What are the flaws of it, and what do you like? The Islamic religion is a very interesting religion because of not only the controversy that surrounds it, but of the way that it was implemented into the Islamic society. Particularly, I have a lot of critiques for Islam from a lot of the immoral things they promote, like hitting women, which is inside of the Quran. And also I don't agree with some of their moral aspects, such as their God that created everything being both good and evil, instead of just accepting that good and evil are entirely subjective. The things I do like about Islam is that I really love I love Islamic history, and I really love their concept of the jinn. Even more so, I think they have a lot of interesting takes on spiritual practices, like being completely ingrained in the spiritual feeling of the gods, from being completely submissive to it and submitting to the divine. I do think that their belief was a lot better when they were a pagan or a polytheist, when they had like a god of the moon. They had these very powerful female gods. I really liked Islam before the monotheistic switch. As most religions, when they turn to monotheism, it's almost like a suicide to the religion, because instantly, once it's monotheistic, it's open for abuse of power, which happened with Islam. So I can't. What is this? So I can't say it's the best religion, but I can say that it is a religion. I also don't believe it's the fan fiction of Christianity, like some people want to say. Okay, so I'm curious about your experiences receiving affection and visions from Anubis. Can you actually see him, or is it more like you can sense him? The answer to the question is a mixture of both. I have had both with Anubis. I have only seen Anubis a total of 3 times. One time he was walking in my house, and he just walked to the door. I knew it was Anubis because of the ears and the wraps that he has. They're mostly on his leg and his arm. The second time, or the first time I've seen Anubis, I've seen Anubis a lot more than 3. But these were more times that I'd seen Anubis more fully. The second time I've seen Anubis, it was in a dream. And he had just kind of been... No, there's a lot of times now that I think about it. He was in a dream, and he was just kind of there. But the thing I saw that made me know it was Anubis was his color. But it was not the same shade of black that you see here. When I saw Anubis, it was like this tone of black that was so dark I could not comprehend the color. I called it true black because it was so dark. And then there was one time Anubis had appeared in a dream as a dog, a very big dog who was guarding and protecting me. this happened a very handful of times that he would do something like that. And one time I had asked him if he would show himself to me, like I wanted to see his face, because I was always curious why he was always hiding his face. Every time I'd see him, I could see his body, but I could never see his face. And he did show me his face, but I kid you not, this was the weirdest experience of my life. I was sleeping in bed. It was the morning, and I was half awake, half asleep, but it feels like I couldn't pull myself out of the sleep. Suddenly, there were these like little beams of light that were drawing an image. And in the beginning, it was an eye. And I'm like, oh, I know that eye. That's Anubis's eye. Because I've kind of seen some images that looked similar to it. But it looked very different from the images. But it was just my brain was like, that looks like Anubis's eye. And suddenly the beam of light started to paint an entire face. And I physically jumped in fear and got out of the dream upon seeing the face. The only way I can describe it, because I can't even describe I can hardly remember it. I can only really describe what it kind of looked like. The only way I can describe what Anubis's face truly looks like is a very grumpy dog. But that is it. He had, I cannot remember what the full form of the face looked like. The most distinct thing were these very big eyes that were like beating and staring, but that's all I can remember. So I have seen Anubis's face once. It was incredibly difficult to understand, and then later down the line, he would pretty much just hide his face. Seth, on the other hand, I have seen Seth multiple times in dreams, but Seth is the most terrifying thing you will ever look at. It's like it's like a mixture of Uncanny Valley and horror. But Seth is not afraid to reveal himself to anybody. Seth will do it regardless. Because Seth really does not seem like he gives two shits about anybody. But Seth is like tall. I wouldn't say he's tall. He's like... this actually aligned with other people's experiences, but Seth is completely white. And he has some black on him. But his face is just... he hides it, and it is the most... like, your brain cannot process what you're looking at. But Seth does not pull punches. Seth will not. Seth will show himself, and he doesn't care if you're afraid or not. Yeah, like Vanity Black, The Eye of Anubis, sounds like the name of a metal album. So, I wanted to read some other comments, but I want to continue this one. So, can you see him when you're wide awake as well as in dreams? Do you have techniques to being able to see him, like some kind of meditation techniques, or is it just an ability you have? So... I have only seen Anubis while awake twice, but that is it. It is harder to see a god when awake than it is asleep, because you are a lot more vulnerable when you are asleep. The mind does a lot more to keep itself protected than people give it credit for. And that is from seeing things that would oftentimes probably be more terrifying to look at. Or sometimes it can't help it, but there's sometimes I think we can't see into different layers, and I sometimes think it's because the mind consistently shuts itself off from it. I have only done it twice, and as for meditation techniques, I cannot give you any. Because Anubis, you cannot make a god reveal themselves to you. You can't. If Anubis wants to, you can ask Anubis, but if he doesn't think you're ready, he's not going to do anything. And he won't even tell you, he will just not do it. So I can't give you meditation. All you could really do is strengthen yourself enough to being able to see him, and to confront him, and to be able to have him reveal himself to you. But for you to do that, I'm not the one to ask. That's all Anubis. So if you want Anubis to reveal himself, you're going to have to ask the source. I've seen that Anubis does not like it when you work with Seth, according to some sources. What do you think about that? Well, I have worked with Seth for about a year. Their altars are relatively close to each other, with the place that I'm living at. I have not had any... I haven't particularly seen those two have an issue with each other. I think it comes from their mythology. I do think they're possibly brothers, but I think that it's... No. I don't think they've had an issue. I think I have seen them argue before to some degree, but I don't think... I've never really seen Anubis and Seth have a problem with you working with one or the other. In fact, the first time I worked with Seth, there was a storm. It was a tornado. That's how he revealed himself to me. So I don't think that's, to me, not true. It's still more than me. I have only seen Anubis in dreams. I typically don't have much control over what I do in dreams. Yeah, that happens. The only thing you can do to help yourself become more control in dreams is to improve self-awareness. But like I said, they're gods. If they want to reveal themselves to you in a way that you will understand, they will. You won't stop them. But if you're not ready, they won't be able to. Seth is the only exception. If you ask Seth to do it, he probably will. Probably. Seth can be interesting to work with. Seth is Anubis' uncle, stepdad, brother. Yeah, their mythology is very mixed with each other. My experience with them, I asked Seth and Anubis the question. The answer that Seth gave me was Anubis is his older brother, and Seth is the younger brother. I think that comes directly from the gods themselves. And the way Seth did it was by having it. I lit a candle over his altar, and the shadow of the candle reflected his statue, and it painted this really, really interesting photo. There was like the corner in the wall, and the light just reflected perfectly off of his altar to where it like split him into two, and there was Seth on one side that looked exactly like his statue, and it was smaller, and it was staring left, and then on the other side of the corner, on the right side of the wall, there would be like an image like the one you're seeing right here of Anubis kind of just standing and looking to the right. And that is how Seth revealed to me that they are brothers. But that is from interpretation, so people are free to have their own experiences as well. That also did come from... That interpretation came from a much later translation of the Egyptian mythology. So someone said, do you think religious books have some truth to them? What do you think of the Quran and the Bible predicting the future in some of the texts? Oh boy, prophecies. I'm a bit of a prophet myself. I have predicted the future. I try to keep my future predictions to myself, though, because I feel like prophets are a lot more dangerous than they believe themselves to be. Some prophets, I think, do it just because the attention is more worth it than the destruction some of their prophecies can cause. The prophecies that these books predict are very, very bad and vague to a degree. One of the prophecies in the Bible that always made me upset was two of them. One that particularly spoke about Christian persecution that would happen during the end times. And the problem with those prophecies like that is Christians have been historically persecuted since they ever formed a church. But funny enough, the persecution came from other Christians. So the problem I have with this prophecy is Christians have been persecuted, but what if it's by Christians themselves? that are persecuting other Christians. And there's other prophecies like a worldwide, like a big war that would happen, which happens like every 100 generations or every 100 years. So a lot of these prophecies are vague, or people are severely misrepresenting what the prophecies actually stand for. So I don't really think a lot of these prophets are predicting anything. They're just making vague interpretations of things and saying that they're going to come true. I can say it's going to rain today, but I know that because it is cloudy outside and my weather app told me. Also, I'm curious. I'm considering becoming a priestess or a nun for Anubis. I'm thinking of asking him if he wants this in November and wondering how I approach this. How did you propose to Anubis, if I may ask? And how did you know that he said yes? For me, Anubis actually said yes, like physically heard his words and everything. I had already planned on proposing in the... I had already planned on proposing about a year after me and Anubis had began working with each other. But it happened a lot sooner. It happened in January. It happened in a really convenient time for how bad everything fell apart after that. I proposed and he said yes. I just got the irk to ask Anubis now about it. And it was really just as simple as just asking. But I do want to say that this isn't me trying to push you away from asking for priest and nunhood, but God spousing did not come with... It didn't come and just fix... It came with a lot more problems than it did benefits. Because God spousing is not easy. Monk and nunhood is not easy either. You are a representation of that God, and if you aren't good at invoking them, you will paint that God in more of a bad picture than intended. And even more so, I was very mentally ill, so my God spousing got really stepped on because trying to understand Anubis was becoming very, very hard. Well, it wasn't becoming hard. It was just, I was trying to work with Anubis, but my shadows and my mental state was constantly getting in my way. Like I've always said, monk and nunhood, you don't even really need to propose to become it. If you truly resign with a god, it will kind of just happen naturally. You'll find yourself doing a lot more things in their name. And I did also realize that at some point, it wasn't that I didn't want to keep working with Anubis, but I needed more gods in my life to work with. And when I started pursuing philosophy and knowledge, then Anubis is one aspect of the many things of the world. So I don't regret my monk and nunhood because death is a very important part of life. And trying to understand it is important to me. But it can be a little tricky with people when you're not necessarily sure. No, not when you're not sure. It can be a little tricky with people when you're not... I don't know the right words for it. It could just be tricky to fully decide if you truly want to be God spouse to this god. But just note that God spousing, while isn't easy, it's also not difficult. You won't have to go around and try to spread the word or evangelicalize. I used to go to cemeteries every weekend and just clean them up, but that was just in honor of Anubis, who appreciated those types of actions. So, monk and nunhood can be hectic, but it can be a lot more enjoyable if that is what if you truly resign with that god. Hello, I have a question. I'm going to be God's spouse to Seth. He proposed in 2021. I thought the ceremony was October that year, but it was an engagement party. How did you go about the ceremony? Okay, I did not have a ceremony. Um, my god spouse with Anubis was pretty much, gosh, my god spouse with Anubis was not of a big party. It was simply just that. It was the engagement, and then I started nunhood. Some gods are different. Some gods, they're like, oh, some gods they're gonna want parties. Some gods they may not. I wanted to throw a party for Anubis, and my god spousery, but it just kind of fell apart at the time. So I didn't have a ceremony. It just kind of, after it happened, I just started working more extensively with Anubis. I wanted to do an engagement, but Anubis kind of backed off from it because I was not, I just didn't have the money to throw a big party. So it can just vary, what your god will want. I kind of have a different opinion on god spousing now, ever since I have practiced it for about 2 years, and kind of the stuff that it brought to the table, which I think I should do a video on, to cover that kind of thing. But I know some gods you just make food and have a ceremony, have a wine party if you want. Gods are really different. Just you need to ask your god what they want. They'll kind of direct you to what they want. Do you think gods feel about... Sorry, my gosh, my dyslexia is horrible. How do you think gods feel about them being portrayed in modern media, games, etc.? There was one thing that I was playing. No, I wasn't playing. I was scrolling through Anubis in media, and there was one thing that he did not like, how he was portrayed in the game. And it was some pirate game where there was like a bunch of pirate crews named after Egyptian gods. And Anubis was portrayed as the villain. And I don't know what it was, but I remember reading some of this out, and I could just feel Anubis was not happy. Like, he just did not like what I was reading. So I think some gods don't really care. I think a lot of them don't, unless it's just being really dishonest to their mythology. I think some gods probably laugh. Like, if you were to put the gods into playing Smite, I think it'd be kind of funny to see how they're all portrayed in those kinds of games. So, awesome. Thank you. You're welcome. Sorry, my phone started glitching out. Does being God's spouse to Anubis affect your everyday life? For example, do you find yourself comforting the grieving or often doing more spiritual work or spirit work? Yes, in the beginning, I did a lot of spirit work. I had consistently helped spirits move on from the dead, consistently helped spirits there was a couple spirits that reached out to me, and I would have to help them move on from the afterlife. Working with Anubis and working with spirits helped me understand what demons are and what actually causes them to form and how they exist, making me not have such a negative view on spirits after that. But yeah, I did find myself doing a lot more spirit work. God spousing and how it affects my everyday life, it really doesn't, not as much as people think. Remember, you're not really married to a god. You are a monk or a nun. Some gods might be different in how they treat you. There might be gods who are a bit more romantic towards you. There might be some gods who just don't really, have a particular way that they act towards more dedicated people. I've known a couple who are kind of like that. So, it doesn't really affect anything. I know my psychosis for a while really gave me a bad taste for god spousing, because I would kind of project a persona onto Anubis that was very abusive, but that that was not the case. So it doesn't really affect much of your everyday life, though some god spouses might have differences in that opinion. I know some god spouses of the goddess Isis that will point out that they have a lot more tendencies to be flirtatious with people because Isis oftentimes tells them to. But back when I said at the beginning of the video that the more you work with a god, the more you'll invoke them to a point that they become almost a part of your personality. Not necessarily like physically a part of you, but sometimes they'll work through you in more ways than you can imagine. I remember you mentioning that in another video that you help lost souls find their way. How do you do that? That's a really hard to answer question because it is hard for me to describe it. I've had times where souls came to me needing help. And I remember they would appear in just really different ways. Sometimes they would already be trapped there. Sometimes I'd have to figure out who the ghost was. There was a lot of stuff. I always, gosh, I know, I kind of get a little whelped because there was a lot of stuff that happened with some of these spirits. There's one spirit who was like a suicide victim from a drug abuse, hung himself and left his wife and kids behind. And I found out that that was actually something that happened. He was trapped in the building that he died in, which was the one I lived in at the time. And he felt like he was a disappointment, and he was really scared to move on. And I had to like help him feel more comfortable with himself. And I told him, I said, if you need to, when you're ready to go, Anubis is right there. But I think there was one more recent event that was the most funny thing. I lived in an apartment complex last year, but this happened earlier this year, and one of my neighbors had died in the middle of the night due to a blood infection. And it was like 11 o'clock, and I get woken up to somebody just going, rah, like screaming, not screaming, but like trying to scare me. And I jumped out of bed and started laughing. And you would think that when you get scared, you might scream, but I didn't scream. I just started laughing because I felt, for some reason, I just felt like laughing. Almost felt like it was a joke. And I found out that day that his name was Ed, that he had passed away at around 11 o'clock. So he had sought out Anubis, or I would assume he found me because of Anubis, and he was kind of just spooking me one last time because, funny enough, Ed was notorious for just jumping at people and trying to scare them. He did that with me and Diane, my other neighbor a lot. So the question of how do you do it, it's just you see them, you hear them, you feel them, and you know how to help them. Sometimes you got to figure it out because sometimes they can be really inconsistent. So I get hung up on the word spouse. It's not necessarily spouse. That's God spousing had it's such a misconcept, such a misunderstood concept. It is monk and nunhood, but some gods are just genuinely more intimate with things. You have intimate gods that exist, and they're like that even before God spousing, like Lilith. So it's kind of a misunderstood. It's a very misunderstood practice by both sides, but only one side is getting really bad misinformation. Anubis I work with too, and he wants me to work on dream interpretation and flame synchronizing or screeing. Oh boy. I don't do flame work. I'm about as useless as a screen door on a submarine on terms of that. Dream interpretations, I am currently making like a playlist of things to interpret in dreams. The recent one is zombies, which I had one last night of something similar. to zombies. But I am not sure if it's worthy of any kind of interpretation. But oh yeah, there was one other encounter I remember having with Anubis, but now I forgot it again. So well. So, but dream interpretation is hard because dreams can have like multiple different meanings, and it's very hard to pinpoint what they are. Sometimes instead of looking on the internet, you just have to ask yourself how you felt. That's how I've had to do it. Dream interpretation is important though, because sometimes it is your brain subconsciously trying to communicate a need to you that it's like it can't tell you physically, but it's communicating in a way. I have mental illness, bipolar with psychosis, and one of the biggest things Seth wants me to do is not being negative of myself and work on my anger issues. That is like the best. Seth is like the best with anger issues, because like I had really bad anger issues too, and like that's right up Seth's alley. Remember I remember you left a comment on another video, and I had told you that you had asked Seth to curse somebody that made you upset. And I will always tell you this, because I've worked with Seth, I know what he does sometimes. Seth will always do something if you give him a reason and an offering to do so. He will not hold back, but just note that comes with consequences. If you make him hurt somebody who did not deserve to be hurt, you will feel it. Especially if you work with Anubis, because that'll make Anubis mad, and Anubis will always give that back to you tenfold. Trust me, I know, from bad experiences. Interesting. I can't see ghosts, so I don't think I'd be able to help much. I will keep lost souls in my prayers, though. Yes, praying for lost souls is a very big important thing. I used to have a prayer which was, O mighty Lord Anubis, may the flames of your judgment judge these souls righteously and cleanse them of their impurities. O mighty Lord Anubis, may you take these souls with your gentle hands and lead them to eternity. O mighty Lord Anubis, thank you for tending to those who have passed. And now I think I invoked Anubis because just like felt him show up behind me. Yeah, try not to say your god's name too many times, because you'll oftentimes you'll invoke them by accident. I have a feeling I'd be like Ed when I'm dead. Wow, I'm dead, but I exist. Let's do ridiculous haunting me. Yeah, that was pretty much Ed. And I think there was somebody else that was constantly saying Ed was scaring them even after he died, so he just kind of died and kept on with what he was doing. What's it like being dead? Do spirits have the choice to move on, or do they need help to move on? As in, do they want to actually and can't move on? So the answer is both a yes and a no. Spirits oftentimes don't move on because they don't want to. The biggest reason spirits don't move on is because they're always holding on to something. And if a spirit holds on too tightly, then they oftentimes have their souls invert and they become a demon, or what we would call them. Demons act on emotions entirely. That's why you have vengeful spirits and angry souls. People's consciousness just doesn't recover from bad mental and emotional states, so when they move on, they don't ever actually become pure enough to fully move on to the next phase. They just get stuck. So demons, like I said, they invert and they act solely on emotion, and they can't process properly. So your best bet is to help them move on. Angry souls are worse. They're the worst to work with. They're the worst to deal with because they are the most incapable of listening. Depressed souls, or souls who are just not ready to let go of something that they lost when they died, they are a lot easier to work with because they're more willing to listen. But souls are a tricky thing. They don't just move on like that. It can probably take a while before a soul can feel comfortable leaving the life they had behind. It's actually, to me, really, really depressing. Wow. My trans girlfriend says they also see Anubis and talks about all the connection timed out. There we go. Sounds like Set is sort of give your wish type of god. Yeah. It's an effective way of teaching, that's for sure. It is. Seth is a very interesting god to work with. Seth, like I said, Seth will do anything if you give him a reason to do it. Seth does not care. I think that's like the one thing everyone says. Seth literally does not care. But just note that not only is he a god that is very easy to piss off. Actually, no, I don't think he's a god that's easy to piss off, but he doesn't care. But just remember that your actions do have consequences. He is a ruler of chaos, and therefore, if he or Anubis are deeming some actions you're doing as unjust, you'll feel the weight of the consequences. I told him to haunt my neighbor's house because she literally upset me, and he knew how mad I was getting, and he wanted to step in. But I still say that haunting somebody may not be like just because they upset you. You can't just haunt them. But like I said, Seth will do anything. What about the times when Anubis held you on his lap when you were first reaching out to him? When it reached out to you, was this in a dream or waking hours? That was in waking hours. I did not see him. I did not see him. I felt him on those. But at that time, I was very mentally, bad. And that was just what he would do as to, give me some kind of embrace when I really, really needed it. He would do that a lot in the beginning because of how just terrible my mental state was. It was bad. Horrible. Yes, sometimes they step in when they know you are having issues as well. I've actually had Anubis and Seth both step in. There was one person I had that it was this guy was a piece of shit. There was this guy I had feelings for, and I was really into him. I was talking to him a lot. And then one day I find that he just lied about everything. And I felt bad because he wanted to work with Anubis, so I gave him an invocation spell, and he really wanted to give Anubis a sex offering. So I gave him the invocation spell, and holy shit, he was having a massive mental breakdown. Anubis was incredibly upset with him. He was texting a demon was there, and that something was trying to kill him, and something was trying to get him, and he felt terrified. And at the time, I didn't realize what was going on, but I'm I know working with Anubis can be very hard because Anubis is a being of death, and death is a very hard thing for people to confront. But, Anubis is normally very, patient and slow with people, so he's not someone who just shows himself and tries to harm them, but he did not like that guy. And then later on, found out this guy lied to me about, literally everything and catfished me, and it was awful. And that was the only time I asked Seth and Anubis. I said, curse this person. If he's going to treat me like that, fucking curse this person. And I don't know what happened after that, but I blocked the person and never spoke to them again. But they have stepped in when things were really, really bad. Anubis is kind of like that. He really, really values the people that he works with. So if you're ever in danger, Anubis will always do what he can to get you out of it. He is very territorial and protective, but he's not territorial in the sense of he's going to stop you from working with another god, or he's going to stop you from making friends. He's just, if there's a bad person, he will step in and be the first to do something. My trans girlfriend, yeah, you end up seeing Anubis a lot. I'm particularly curious about this because I've had similar experiences with Anubis, except he sent me a picture, which I've had Anubis do that before too. He sent me like a picture in my head that I could like recall I can recall exactly. Talks about him all the time. What happens when you move on? You know, the answer to what happens when you move on, I wish I had the answer, but I only seem to have bits and pieces of it. I did a video on what the gods of death told me that death was like, but other than that, I don't really know how to describe it. I don't know what lies fully beyond there. I hope to become a god one day. I hope that whenever I move on, I'll achieve some kind of divinity, and I'll be able to help people like I was able to in this life. I hope I can continue pursuing my endeavors of understanding the world. I just want to know if it's possible. Certainly if the Buddha and Jesus were able to do something similar, it's not impossible for a human to become a god. Maybe just not right here. I once felt welcome to worship Set. I had a moment where I felt like I was existing in my heart. I politely said no, but then I also sang him a Diana as a sort of a parting offer. Diana is a short hymn, by the way. What is Seth or Mentoro? Set or Mentor? So Set is the Egyptian god of chaos. He is a god that the many different mythologies of Seth exist, and I think the one that I like the most is that he died, they killed him, but then they had to bring him back because Set was the only person who could deal with Apep, who was a god of destruction. And the god of chaos knew how to contain the god of destruction. So while Seth was evil, he was also a necessity, basically forming aspects and concepts of Taoism before Taoism was even a thing, which I always really liked that part about Seth from the mythology. In the world today, I confessed I don't know who Mentor is, but I'm pretty sure it was Seth. I don't really know which one is the proper pronunciation. No, I mean, I came across a picture on the internet of Anubis embracing a troubled person when I needed it the most, although I have engraved images in my mind's eye. Yeah, that is a kind of Anubis thing. He always... Well, this is disgusting. Anyways, but that is kind of like an Anubis thing. I think they also called him, someone pointed out in my comment section that in later periods of Egypt, and even amongst like early pagans, Anubis was worshipped as a god of the helpless, of people who were in complete despair. Anubis was always the one that was there to be with them and to help them through their hardships. So that was something I remember seeing Anubis be more associated with. Homeless people would worship him for protection. What's your thoughts on reality shifting? Reality shifting, I am divided on it because I kind of don't believe it, and at the same time I don't agree with it. I've only reality shifted a very handful of times, and I think that people who are reality shifting are doing it as a form of escapism and not out of the sake of facing a problem. And reality shifting can become really dangerous. It can be harmful to the body as well. Diana, no Diana. It's Lithinerum. It's okay, not upset. I'm either blessed or cursed by Basset. I have a kitty who is refusing to leave me alone. Oh my gosh. No, Basset is notorious for that. Also, have a good day, Prumus, sweetie. Poor Mina, sweetie. Anubis bless you as well. Oh yeah, but Basset, I've had her on multiple occasions leave me cats. That's like something she does. Cats are signs of protection by Basset. That's what it was believed. So are dogs. And it's just unfortunately that both Anubis and Basset are notorious for doing that. So if you work with both of them, I really hope your house is basically just an animal shelter, because they will do that. Incredibly known for leaving cats everywhere. Also, we're probably going to end the stream soon. I'll just kind of see where I feel at 7 o'clock on my time. If I feel like the stream's still going strong, I'll keep it going for maybe another half an hour. But if it's kind of approaching dead, then I'll probably just turn it off for a while. I am a college student, so I do need to study a little bit. And I wanted to do this for 2 hours, but I just didn't start it. I didn't get to start it till 5:30. Yeah, cats are absolute freaking jerks. Very hard to deal with sometimes. Also, I just want to point out, everybody, that I am I am accepting donations. I'm going to plug in my Cash App on streams from now on. And I'm going to kind of post not a video, but like something in the community about it. I'm trying to do this more full time. So like any money that you guys donate, even if it's literally a penny or $1, like is absolutely appreciated. And it just kind of helps me keep this thing afloat. I want to do Patreon at some point, but that's not going to happen until 500 subscribers when I get a Discord server up. But I just wanted to kind of keep that out there for people who want to donate. Also, keep in mind, hopefully tonight, I'm going to upload a meditation video. That's just like a relaxing video to watch. And I'm going to be doing a video on philosophical suicide. What is it and what is it and how to prevent it and how it can be harmful to fall into it. And then I'm going to have probably another meditation video up as well. Hey, serious question. Is there a difference between a priest and a monk? No, there is none. So monks and nuns versus priest and priestess. A priest is normally somebody who is like the person who sits and runs like the church. A monk is somebody who is a devout servant of that god or goddess. And or a monk or nun is someone who's a devout servant of that god and goddess and normally fills the role of the person who embodies that kind of being. Monks are more like people who kind of go and do their own thing. Priests and priestesses are people who are the ones that actually run the organizations for those kinds of religions. What do you feel about Kemetic interpretation of human beings being created? I don't agree with a lot of theories that are against the concept of evolution. My belief is that evolution very well could have happened. And if it did happen, my belief is evolution did happen. And the gods picked us because we evolved to be so intelligent. So these concepts that the gods created us, the gods didn't create us. We did form from something. But even though we formed, we were chosen by the gods because of our intelligence. The only problem I have is I have adapted a bit of some of the nihilistic concepts, which is that life does not owe anybody an explanation for why they exist, nor does it owe anybody a purpose for their existence. Purpose is entirely subjective, so you're the one who makes your own purpose in life. To me, gods pick you for who you are, not because they made you be who you are. And that to me gives me a lot more of an empowered feeling. I still need to mail a letter and do the dishes. I hope I'm not keeping you. I'm currently just staring outside of my window, looking at the really nice view from my window. I really need water. Holy crap. So a monk and nun isn't going to start a new pagan group or officiate. They'll just do the work of a deity. That's funny enough. Priests and priestesses are the ones who won't start the religion. Monks are the ones who start the religion. Preaching and interpreting is what sparks people to be inspired and drawn towards a religion. Monks don't necessarily go and form the church and start preaching, but they may go and represent their god and draw people to them and speak interpretations, which forms new religions. Monks are the ones who actually make the religions, essentially. Priests and priestesses are the devout people to that religion who keep the community going. No, I'm keeping me. Oh my, I get that. I can see that. Yeah, that's what monks were very notorious for throughout history, like the Shaolin monks and stuff. And I need to get some water and use the bathroom. Be right back. Well, no, not yet, not yet. I probably will end the stream at 7, just because I need to go get some stuff done. And I just wanted to kind of open this Q&A for a little bit. In the future, if I can get a lot of people on, I might keep it up for a little bit longer. But sometimes I just gotta Do you consider yourself a materialist? What do you think about financial spells and stuff like that? Financial spells will never make money come out of nowhere. I just hate to break it. You can cast a money spell all you want, but you'll never make money appear. My bigger opinion is that all they can do is give you the opportunities to receive or make money. They can't ever actually give you money. It is a very unfortunate thing to have to believe, but to me that is just the truth. I've never once had a financial spell work. I've enjoyed it. Hey, if you want more content, you can definitely you can follow me if you want, or subscribe. And yeah, I'll be having a lot more videos up here soon. I think I like this new format. I used to play video games while on the live streams, but I think I'm just gonna have this picture and leave the comment section open. It's kind of like a meditation space as well. But I really appreciate you guys all coming out tonight, and I definitely hope I see you guys all in the future, and I hope you all have a lovely day, and may the gods bless you. Hey, yeah, don't be a stranger. Don't be a stranger. If you want more, never feel afraid to drop a follow.